Lennart Niermann is an insanely strong DPS hunter who makes the win team much stronger. And the way Lennart is going to do this is by using one of these two very best sets for your Lennart, with the very first one being the 8 set effect of Chaotic Infamy. So Chaotic Infamy on the 8 set effect bonus, in my opinion, is going to be your Lennart's very best set for him, because in teamfight mode, the user's damage dealt will increase by 40%. And then also when the enhanced Infamy effect has stacked 10 times, which you apply through using skills, it can then become Chaotic Infamy. So then what Chaotic Infamy essentially then does is it will increase the user's basic skill and also ultimate skill damage by 100%, which is great for your Lennart because that's where a lot of his damage is going to come from. But then finally, the user will then regain 5% of their mana points when using their basic skill, which can be triggered every 30 seconds. And this is absolutely amazing for Lennart because his skills do take up a huge amount of mana points. Which then brings me on to his second best build, and this is going to consist of you using the 4 set effect bonus of Iron Will as well as also Outstanding Ability. And this is because Lennart is a defense scaling DPS, so with Iron Will being able to increase your defense by up to 33%, it's going to give him a pretty sizable damage increase, but also the increase into your ultimate skill damage by 50% every 20 seconds will also greatly benefit his damage. And for Outstanding Ability, you all pretty much know what this set does, as it will increase your damage by 60% as long as your maximum mana points are above 40%. Your main stats as well for your Lennart Niermann are going to be very crucial for you to get right, because for your helmet, your body armor, and your ring, additional defense or defense percent, but preferably additional defense, will be your best option. But then the only two other ones that do really matter are going to be your bracelet and your boot main stats, because for your bracelet, with Lennart being of the wind element, wind damage percent is by far going to be his best option. And then finally, critical hit damage for his boot main stat is by far the best one you can go for. Moving on then, we have your Lennart Niermann's best substats, and just like a lot of his main stats, additional defense and defense percent are going to be your best substats, with critical hit rate getting that up to at least 50% with some surplus would be very, very good, as well as getting your critical hit damage to be over 200%. And then finally, his most other important substats are going to be getting a good amount of defense penetration, especially if you are going to be playing Workshop of Brilliant Lights with him, and then also damage increase, but even MP consumption reduction can be pretty good because, like I did mention before, his skills do take up a lot of mana. Cores are up next for your Lennart, and he only really has two actually important ones that they do really need to worry about, which is going to be his mind and also his spirit piece. And starting off with his mind core, and the best one is easily going to be the Nameless Demon's Deception, because when you use your ultimate skill, you can increase your critical hit damage by 20% for 8 seconds, and this is pretty much the only one that he can really benefit from, so it will make it his best one. But then for the body piece, this one doesn't really matter anywhere near as much, so you can just go with whichever one that you personally prefer and just focus on prioritizing stats over the actual core passive. And then finally, the Teeth of the Watcher is by far going to be your best spirit piece for Lennart, because this will unfortunately decrease your MP recovery rate by 10%, but more importantly will then decrease your skill MP consumption by 12%, which will then heavily reduce the amount of mana that your Lennart will use with his skills. And then for the main stats for all of your cores, additional attack, defense, and HP will be your best main stats. And then for your substats, pretty much you'll just want to focus on whatever kind of stats your Lennart is missing, being either crit damage, damage increase, defense pen, or even potentially MP consumption reduction. So next up, let's talk about all of your Lennart's best advancements and what you should go for. And even though all of your Lennart's advancements are all very, very good, his most important one is actually going to be his A3. But before I do start talking about his A3, let's start off with his A1, because this actually says when the analysis effect has stacked 20 times, he can activate the defensive divination circle effect onto your entire team, which is amazing. And what this essentially does is it basically says you cannot lose or gain instances of the analysis effect, but you do then gain some super armor and can then also increase your whole entire team's crit damage and also defense by 30%, lasting for 20 seconds. His A2 then is going to give a pretty sizable damage increase, because this will increase his wind elemental damage by 30%, which then brings me on to his A3, which, like I said, is the most important advancement for him. And if you are going to pull for him, this is a definite one you need, because when the user uses either one of his basic skills or his ultimate skill, he can actually increase the duration of the attack zone that is created by it for 3 seconds. But then even more importantly, what this A3 then does is it says when win team members, including yourself being Lennart, use their basic skill, Lennart will recover 3% of his mana points and then his power gauge by 5%. His A4 then does offer very valuable stat increases, because for every wind ally that you do have in your team, the defense of wind team members increases by 14%, and then you can further increase everyone's HP by 8%. And then finally, his A5 will enhance a debuff that he has called Hunter's cage, and this will increase the target's damage taken from Lennart Niermann by 30% for a total of 40 seconds. And then finally, some other quality of life he does get from this A5 is going to be 10 instances of the analysis effect when entering the stage, but then also the cooldown of his ultimate will decrease by 25 seconds. Onto your Lennart's skill level priority, and his most important skill for you to level up is going to be his ultimate skill, because this will deal damage for 7 seconds with its multiplier going up to 8,530.5% of his defense's damage. And then the only two other important skills for you to level up are going to be his second basic skill, which does damage for 7 seconds and can have its damage multiplier go up to 7,369.5% of his defense's damage. But then his first basic skill will deal damage over 5 seconds with the multiplier going up to 8,419.5% of his defense's damage. With then, of course, when it comes to the rest of his skills, you can just follow the recommended skill level up order that you can see in game. The weight of responsibility is Lennart Niermann's exclusive weapon and is very good for him because this can increase his defense by up to 50%, which is a very, very big increase. But what it can then do is it can add a lot of extra quality of life to his whole entire kit, because when he uses his first basic skill, his second basic skill, his ultimate skill, and even his support skill, he can inflict the paralyze effect for up to 5 seconds within a completely 10-meter area every 20 seconds, which will work very well with his skills. So then the penultimate section of this video is going to be about your Lennart Niermann's very best team, and his two best supporting hunters for him to work with is going to be Goto Ryuji as your main breaker, and then of course Hansemi as your main support, with the formation of you having Goto first, Hansemi second, and then Lennart Niermann third being the best formation for this team, because you do want to make the most of your Goto Ryuji's A4, increasing the damage of the third hunter in your team by 24%. But also what Goto does amazingly well is spamming a ton of basic skills, which is going to work very well with your Lennarts, because Lennarts can recover mana whenever someone does use a basic skill. When it comes to your Hansemi and what she does for this team is she can recover your whole entire team's mana points every 3 seconds, and she can apply very good buffs such as Breath, increasing basic skill damage, Sharp Breath, which increases crit rate, crit damage, and charges power gauge, and finally the newly changed Natural Unity, which increases your whole entire team's attack and defense by 10%, as well as wind damage by 20% for 25 seconds. And then for shadows, he does have many different options, but my personal favorite, especially with your authority leader, is going to be Igris for his up to 8% increase into your critical hit rate. And then the best supportive shadow, as always, is going to be Serbi for his combustion debuff, and then either you can run Bestie for defense penetration in high-end content, or you could run Beru for the punishment debuff. So then finally, let's talk about how you can best use your Lennart Niermann. And he is definitely one of the easiest hunters for you to use in the game, because essentially once you've applied all of your Gotos and Hansemi's buffs, debuffs, whatever it may be, you'll of course want to bring him in with his QTE skill, followed up by his ultimate skill if you do actually have it, and then all you have left to do is just use both of his basic skills, and then you can just swap out back into your Goto Ryuji and then into your Hansemi just to repeat the rotation once again. So there you have it, that is a complete build guide for Lennart Niermann, and overall, if you did enjoy this video or you just found it useful in general, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, I will see you all in the next video. Peace!